And with that, I'm going to jump in and welcome um, Sam from Recycle PV Solar. Recycle PV Solar keeps PV out of the landfills by recycling and repurposing solar modules. This, like I said, is a huge issue. If you think about all the solar that's going up, or the fact that SMUD has a warehouse full of solar that it doesn't know what to do with because it's old solar. And with that, um, I'm going to follow your you, Sam. Do you want me to go to the next slide?
Sounds great.
All right, go ahead.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. Um, so I've been in the solar business for a long time, over 40 years, uh, mainly in the photovoltaic field, in manufacturing, installation, and now recycling. So here we go. We partnered with a company in Europe called PV Cycle, and PV Cycle is the largest in the world recycler of um, of solar modules, starting off in Belgium, Europe, and now they're throughout Europe and working just the beginnings in Asia and Latin America. So our mission, is pretty simple: is to keep solar panels out of landfills, and that's our goal, and to provide all the services in order to do that. We started working on this process of collecting solar modules and looking into it, in a pretty serious way about 4 years ago. And about 2 years ago, we incorporated into what we have today and opened our first plant in Tucson, Arizona. And then recently, we're just underway in our new Reno plant, processing plant. And then we're looking at one more plant in the US as well. So we're real involved not only the technology, how to do it. It's a very difficult process to recycle solar panels. It's not a simple process. There's very few machines that actually do that. So we've been working with our partner in Europe, and as well as the manufacturers in Europe that build these machines, to bring those machines here. And we have some of the first machines things here. But policy is a big part of what we're dealing with. Being able to drive the policies, bring the education level up to, one of the problem that we have of end of life of solar. So, one of the things we just celebrated just a few months ago was that California has now installed over 1 million solar roofs throughout California. And we were involved on our installation part of more than 9,000 systems in Sacramento alone. And those are, in partnership with SMUD. And a lot of those systems exist today, but we began installing those systems around 2001. And now a lot of those systems are aged and just beginning to be disassembled and reclaimed. So we're trying to work to make sure that those panels don't find themselves in the landfill. Okay, so here's the basic problem. I'll go through a few problems and we'll talk about solutions. But end of life EOL panels it's increasing at a rapid rate based on when they were installed. And California was in the forefront of installing solar panels. Still today, about 65% of the nation's solar panels exist still today in California. In order to address this problem in a forward way, a national program really needs to be in place. So we work throughout the different states that are beginning to do legislation and try to bring in some visibility to it. And the goals are, we have a long ways to go. In Europe, our partners recycle about 95% of all the solar panels that come down at end of life. In the USA, we only do about 10%. So we have a long ways to go to catch up with what Europe has done. Every 90 seconds, a solar panel system is installed in the US. That's 24 hours a day. It's a never-ending good problem to have, is that we're increasing our footprint of clean energy on a rapid basis and competing with coal and other forms of energy in a clean way. But we haven't addressed end of life. Just again, to put it in perspective, so we're talking about 140,000 panels per day, And if you look on, as a recycling issue and metrics, is 7 million pounds a day are being installed. And that 7 million pounds will have an end of life at some point that has to be dealt with. And also to look at, because of the rapid growth of solar, it's increasing about 35 to 40% year over year. So, and because of its benign nature while it's producing power, it's getting to be the power source of choice pretty much worldwide. Kind of a simple chart, between now and 2050, the global capacity of solar is increasing, and it's increasing in urban areas, but also in off-grid areas all throughout Asia and Africa. It is the easiest way to increase a power system, and also to isolate from power outages and things that a lot of developing countries face. Solar is a clean number one first choice, and that's why we're seeing the rapid uptake. But along with that rapid uptake is a declining cost, and that cost has dropped dramatically over the last 10 years. So in the US, we have about 65 gigawatts installed already. It's 5 million tons of solar panels, and it's growing, of course. A lot of us that manufactured these solar panels in the past, and selling them and using them, it was thought of that they lasted almost forever with very little maintenance, and that's how they were sold, and they're still sold that way today. And I hear either forever, or I definitely hear 30, 40, 50 years of service. And even though solar panels could do that, we're finding that it's really typically about 12 and a half years seems to be the typical lifespan of a normal installation, and for lots of reasons we can go. So some of the reasons that these systems are not really lasting, I say 25 years, but I mean, like I said, I'm hearing up to 50 years, is remember, solar panels, the PV type of panels really came from development of the space industry and satellite development. It was the choice of power for satellites because it's reliable. And so they were built under those exact standards. High quality, and also very expensive. But in order to drive those panel prices down, to be used more for terrestrial applications like we see today, things had to be changed. And and a lot of companies that built these panels are from Asian companies that sometimes cut corners to make them lower cost. So that's why we're seeing a lot of more failures today than we did, say, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Recalls, we're seeing quite a few recalls from companies and good manufacturers that did their best job to manufacture the product in the proper way. But again, cutting corners a little bit, diodes are a big problem, and solar panels, they overheat and they break. And I don't know if you saw some of the Walmart fires. There's 450 Walmarts across the nations that have PV on them, and I think 7 to 8 of them caught on fire, and a lot of them were shut down and being retrofitted now. So weather and ever increasing weather problems. Hail's getting larger with climate issues. Of course, we're seeing fires in California, hurricanes, tornadoes. All that is destroying vast amounts of solar, especially in the big utility parks that you see. We worked on a project last year that had 270,000 solar panels, and they were destroyed in less than 20 minutes by a tornado, I'm sorry. And that plant was scheduled to be 25 years in producing power. It only lasted 8 months. And when that happened, the tools weren't in place to be able to recover that panel, the recycling and repurposing that system, because it was supposed to. So here's just a snapshot of some of the, the causes that we're seeing. You can see weather is definitely a large one. Fire, like we're seeing in California now. Uh, all the defects in the manufacturing of the panel. Um, these all account for some of the early life failures of solar panels. Um, Not that they're not good these days. I mean, panels do last, they can last for a long time, but because of the rapid growth and because of sometimes questionable manufacturing, we're seeing a lot of early life failures. So we're always asking, what does it cost to recycle? Well, there's, the typical costs, and it depends on where the panels are located, how many there are, access to the site, all those kind of things, and what type, and maybe even brands sometimes of the solar panels. So $15 to $45 is the basic cost, and typically the average cost really is around $18 for standard panels. To put that in perspective, though, in Europe, because of the policies they put in place for about 13 years now, the cost has gotten down to about 70 cents per panel to collect, transport, and process, a very reasonable price. And that's paid up front by manufacturers of the solar panels, and they make that program work. In the US, what we compete with is about that same price, about 75 cents per panel that it costs to take these to landfills. So today, in the places that landfills do still accept solar panels, the problem is that for 75 cents, you can get rid of your solar panel. And that sometimes is a choice because the cost of recycling is so high. What we're proposing, we're kind of trying to enlighten the solar industry and others to try to put together a program, much like a bottle bill, something like that, that would be about 1 cent per watt. That would happen. That would pay for a program today to be able to collect and manage solar panels based on the number of panels sold today, being able to reclaim the solar panels that are coming out of service. Next. So today we would call it a volunteer program in the US. In Europe, it's a mandatory program, and that's why we see it working so well. It's a European mentality of social responsibility passed around to across all of Europe for all sorts of electronics and other consumer goods. That there is the guidance and the working with the industries to be able to make sure the end of life is handled correctly. So in the US, we have this volunteer program. So in order to do the volunteer program, to be able to add some value to that, to be able to, for manufacturers of solar panels and distributors and installers and all that, to be able to start a program where there's some benefit to that, as for branding and for customer satisfaction and being able to truly process panels at the end of life and recognize the issue and jump into and make it better. That's what we're seeing is the next step for the US. So same as we're seeing with other products in the US. Most states have some kind of battery take back program, car tires, TVs, all the consumer products that we have today that have been pretty much, the policy in those states charge some up front, call it a tax or whatever. I think TVs now in California are about $11 per TV, but cans and bottles have the 5 cent to 10 cent fee on those bottles, and car tires. We don't even think about it anymore. We just pay that price at the time of checkout, and that pays for all the downstream collection, recycling. All that is paid for by and large. The recycling programs throughout the U.S. definitely has some challenges, but the car battery industry was one of the better examples of being able to charge that $15 core charge up front for car batteries, and they started that about 10 to 12 years ago. That accounts for 98% of, so pretty much all car batteries are now recycled throughout the US because it wasn't a policy enacted by the US. It was actually the battery industry came together and co-opt this program to a high core charge to make sure that they got batteries back. So they had more raw materials, easier than mining, but also because less toxic, and they want to mitigate all their liability. So it was a good win-win for everyone. Solar panels have no program. So I think until we get a program state by state or across the US, it's still a volunteer program, which makes it grow really slow, which makes it more expensive. You guys know where this is from? This photograph? Maybe have any idea? Look familiar? Maybe not from this side, but this is the side of the Rancho Seco nuclear power plant with the solar arrays in the front. And this solar array was one of the largest in the world for a long, long time, many, many years, I think for probably 15 or more years. It was decommissioned about 5 years ago. And sad to say, we believe that most of them went to landfill because it was the easiest path. And that's kind of where we started with our recycling business. We saw this and we thought this shouldn't happen. So that's when we began to really look into the problem and the issues and the solutions of how to solve keeping panels out of landfills. This is a quick chart by Arena. It's a part of NREL that has put together a really nice report on end of life. It's almost 5 years old now, the report, so it's really dated. Things have really changed. If you see this little pink line on here, about the year 2030 to 2035, we're still working on the numbers, but that's about the time in that year that we're going to be decommissioning more solar panels than we're going to be installing. And that's only 10 years from now. So it's not that far from now that we really need to look at having really good recycling and processing and reuse programs in place in order to meet that demand, which is 10 years away. Pictures coming up. So a lot of big power plants throughout the US and California especially, and a lot of them are being decommissioned because, like I said before, about 12 and a half years we're seeing these things come down. So there's ways of dealing with it. Recycling is one of the paths to deal with these panels. The more difficult places, if you see these little photos on the left, I've been to these places. I've been to Nigeria, I've been to places in Africa and Latin America that recycle in some ways. You call it recycling, not really. It's taking wastes from Europe and the US and doing awful ways of stripping out the metals and in very unclean ways, causing pollution, just ravaging the landscape. And we're trying to keep that from happening. We're trying to deal with our waste here in the US and properly handle it. And also reuse. If you see the photos on the right, we work a lot in Africa and Latin America and Haiti, Belize, Mexico, providing used solar panels. And here also in the US and Native American reservations, being able to reuse panels that came off of these plants. So they definitely have a secondary life. Just a quick one. You can, Roger or Thomas, you could do the next one. Just show you some horrible things that we see in the field. This was an experimental project, a floating planet project. The wind came up and boom, it was gone. It's hard to design for every problem out there. So one of the things to look at with what we're trying to do is we've got valuable materials in these solar panels. It is really, really difficult to get out. And different solar panels have different technologies, but being able to mine those materials out in a efficient way and reusing those materials makes a lot of sense. In order to do it the proper way, we have to have volume. And that's kind of the chicken and egg issue in the US right now. We've got to get the volume up, probably by policy, to be able to put in place the measures to be able to efficiently and cost effectively mine these materials. So here's an optimistic kind of number of the components that we pull out. So glass has a fairly low resale value. but it does have two things against it. It has a really expensive processing cost. It also has a very high shipping cost. So these prices are per ton. If you look at the glass prices of $80 to $100 a ton, well, if we try to ship it more than about 1,000 miles, it costs about $250 to ship it. So we have to be very careful about what we do with this glass. We're trying to look at our plants being close to recycling places that use glass or glass manufacturing. We're working with companies that make fiberglass insulation for homes that can reuse that glass. So being able to have a downstream partner is really important. So what we do is, we collect these solar panels and we put them into 3 different bins. We put them into a bin that if they're in good shape and we test them and everything physically looks good, the panels are undamaged. They have a small resale, but a resale value or a donation value being put right back in the service. The next thing, which is even a little more difficult to do, is to refurbish those, to take those panels, do the work that they need to have done to make them usable again and safe, and then use them mainly in off-grid applications worldwide. And then the third bin is recycle everything else that's left over. So all the salvageable materials we can pull out of it.
Mhm.
This is one of our mottos: don't let solar go to waste. We try to reuse what we can and then recycle everything else. So what we do is pretty high tech, but everything that we need exists today. It's just the will to make it happen. And it's bringing awareness to the problem that I helped create, and also to fix that problem. There's a lot of research. NREL, UL is helping. A lot of manufacturers are helping. So that technology we've been developing as well in Europe and with our partners. So PV Cycle has an existing program that works. The collection program works, but again, it's mandated in Europe. So it had to work in some fashion, and they've been, playing with it and making adjustments over the last 13 years to make it work. But today it works, and it shows that for 90 cents a solar panel costs, it works, and that's paid by the manufacturer. So end users don't even see that cost. It's just rolled into the cost of the product. So these are some of the machines that exist today, and we've bought 2 of the smaller machines, the first part of these machines. We're also working on a mobile machine that we can actually take it out to the large plants and be able to do some work at the plants themselves. So that's what we're developing right now. So that's what we do, guys. There's not a lot of us out there trying to do this. Because we've been in the business so long, I think that's why we understand the program and the challenges in doing that. And the more we looked into it, the more we saw it was a bigger problem than we ever thought. So now we're trying to make a difference and trying to clean up some of the messes that we made over the last 40 years. Thanks.